Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Asset Transfer Committee of West Lothian Council. My name is Craig Meek and I'm the Vice Chair of this committee and will be chairing this meeting today in the absence of Councillor Susan Mannion. So because I'm logged in remotely, Lorraine's kindly agreed to read out the preamble of the meeting today. So Lorraine, passed over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So meetings are usually broadcast live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel. Webcasts of meetings have been suspended from the 16th of March until the 7th of May because of the Scottish Parliament election on the 7th of May. This meeting is not therefore being broadcast live. Members of the public will still have their usual statutory right to attend meetings in person, even when they are not being webcast. This recording of this meeting will be available through the Council's website soon after the 7th of May. Today the Chair is being assisted by colleagues from Committee Services and IT Services. Attendees may be joining the meeting from another location. Everything said while microphones are live will be recorded. Members are asked to be polite, respectful and patient. There is more information, including a privacy statement about meeting arrangements, on the Council's website. An agenda has been published showing the business for today's meeting. The Chair will introduce each item and usually a Council officer will speak briefly about their report before councillors ask questions, have a discussion and make any decisions that are required. Councillors might leave the meeting from time to time when they have declared interests that prevent them taking part. There will be a pause if that happens and they will be invited back in for the next item of business. If the meeting is a long one, it may be adjourned temporarily for a meal break or a comfort break. The Chair will say if that is going to happen.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Much appreciated for doing that and stepping into the breach. Obviously, just a wee reminder to everybody that it is very, very important today's meeting that everybody uses the request to speak button, because I'll not be able to see it otherwise. And if you are speaking, if the microphone is not live, I won't be able to hear it. So please remember to use the request to speak button. So I notice just before I move on with it, oh, that's grand, somebody had pressed the button there. So order of business will be as per the agenda. But I've skipped the declarations of, I've skipped apologies for absence. So any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies today from Councillor Harry Carmill, Susan Mannion and Willie Boyle.
Perfect, thank you very much. And do we have anybody subbing for these three people?
No subs for this meeting, Chair.
That's perfect, thanks very much, Lorraine. Any declarations of interest from the people that are here today around the meeting? Councillor Tony Boyle.
It's not a declaration of interest as such, it's a more a clarity statement. I am one of the ward councillors, and at the AGM, I think it was 2004 or 5, I was appointed onto the management committee, but later on I was appointed to this committee. So I wrote to the management committee secretary explaining the situation, that there was a potential conflict of interest and I hadn't taken place in any of the meetings. There was a subsequent meeting at which representatives of the King's Church came in and spoke to Paul Community Council, at which I and Councillor Carlin got up, left that meeting until such times as they had finished and went back in again. I have listened to discussions on and over the asset transfer, but I have never expressed my personal opinion. So,
perfect.
Thank you.
Tony, thanks for that clarification. Councillor Carlin, Mike Carlin.
Yep, similar to Tony, I'm a ward councillor and I've been at the community council in Uphall. And yes, Tony and I did have to leave when the King's Church turned up, so we stepped out.
That's perfect. Thanks very much, Mike, for that update as well. Any other declarations of interest? Nope. So as I say, the order of business will be as per the agenda. So moving on to item number 4, confirm of draft minutes of the Asset Transfer Meeting Committee held on the 11th of March. Is everybody happy? I'll take silence as everybody's happy. Councillor Boyle?
Agreed.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So item number 5, and the one and only item that's on the agenda, is the community asset transfer request for Uphall Community Centre and Strathrock Place in Uphall. And Scott, is it yourself that's going to be presenting the report?
It is indeed, Chair. Thank you and good afternoon. The purpose of this report is to advise the Asset Transfer Committee that a valid community asset transfer request has been received from Uphall Community Trust with King's Church West Lothian in respect of the Uphall Community Centre in Strathrock Place, Uphall, and to ask the committee to determine that request on behalf of the council. The officer recommendations are set out in section B of the report, and those recommendations are that the committee notes the receipt of the valid community asset transfer request and approves that request on the terms and conditions set out in the report. Chair, members will no doubt be aware of the exercise that officers have been involved in over the past 2 years or so to review and modernise the Council's community centres portfolio, and as part of that we've been encouraging and working with community groups to promote asset transfer as an alternative operating model for our community centres. We are pleased to have worked with the applicant here and to have seen this application being developed and ultimately coming forward to committee today. As evidenced by the scorecard findings, officers consider the proposal to be a strong one, with a wide range of benefits and positive outcomes for the community and strong governance and financial arrangements in place. The proposal would also contribute a figure in the region of £65,000 per annum towards the Council's approved community centres revenue savings. And Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
That's very helpful, thank you. So I'm presuming there probably will be some questions there, but thanks for taking us through that, Scott. So we'll kick off straight away with questions. Anybody got any questions on the report itself? Councillor Carolyn?
Well, first of all, I'd like to clarify that the council's goal here is to secure the required cost saving. So that's stated in D4.5 and D3. And I'd rather not call it the UCTKCWL. Can I just call that the trust or the charity?
Yeah, that's fair enough, Mike, thanks.
Right, so, and I believe that the trust's goal is to establish a thriving, open and accessible community hub. So that's stated in D4.1. So in D4.2, so this is to Scott, it says here that you received no representations for or against. Do you know why that was?
Scott?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as part of the statutory process, officers are obliged to publicise the receipt of valid community asset transfer request, and we did that, and there's a statutory 20 working day period where interested parties are able to express any opinion on that application, be it in favour or against it, and that part of the report is merely confirming that there were no representations received during that 20-day period.
Thanks very much, Scott. Mike, you got any?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why we got no representations for or against. Does this show an apathy?
Scott, I don't know if you could answer that or not.
Yeah, happy to come in there, Chair. My interpretation is it's not an apathy. I think the way to assess that perhaps more accurately is to look at the business plan that was included in the report, which speaks about engagement and all the work that the applicant has done in preparation for this. So I think that 20 working day period is a bit of a mechanical process. It's perhaps not that widely known, but I think what is more important is the work that I've done, the foundations that have been laid and the work that have been done by the applicant in their business plan.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott. Mike?
So moving on to D 4.6 evaluation, Table 1B identifies the benefits. Is the scoring subjective or tangible? And if it is tangible, can you give examples to justify the score, especially those scoring 8?
Scott?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just get the scorecard in front of me. So in a general context, the scorecard has been developed by officers over a period of time, learning from their experiences in previous asset transfers and with input from the Council's governance manager. And it speaks to and sets out some statutory criteria that officers are required to consider as part of the application. So we've gone through that, and the officer board is made up of officers from a range of services across the Council. So it includes property, it includes finance, there's legal representation, economic development, community regeneration, all the officers that are involved in a broad range of services to take a holistic approach to the application that's come forward. In terms of the individual benefits of it, again, the group that has been constituted and formed to take this forward is an amalgamation of the existing Community Centre Management Committee that have been in place for many years and done lots of good work and at the heart of their community, and one of their anchor tenants in the form of the King's Church. So again, officers were satisfied about where the objectives and where the strengths of the application lie, and the scoring reflected that.
Yeah, but I'm asking for an example to justify a scoring. So could you give me an example, for instance, on public health? Why did that score 8?
Scott?
Yeah, so in public health, I mean, again, in very general context, when we're looking at the project at hand here, they are very broad, general community aspirations as a community centre, and would continue to operate largely as a community centre. So public health is one item and one criteria that would generally be covered by that. So it could be physical exercise, it could be yoga classes, it could be a dance class, it could be mental health, it could be any range of activities that would typically take place in a community centre, and I've done so over the years at Uphall.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
In D 4.6, the board, well, it states in 4.6, the board were satisfied with the financial projections of the project. However, in Table 2A, 4, use of resources, you state the application lacked detail in terms of financial projects. Can you please explain why the board was satisfied with the projections when it's lacking detail?
Mark?
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to answer that one. The details within the business plan cover their kind of general income and planned expenditures, but they are considered to be very conservative. So if you were getting a more detailed plan, you would expect to see more information on future grant income, for example, which a building of this kind would normally be expected to generate somewhere around about £40,000 plus a year, and that would be perfectly normal and has been benchmarked against other kind of similar facilities. But they put in conservative estimates to show the basic levels that they would expect. And it's really just demonstrating that their plan at present, the way it's presented, is viable, and their planned income, from the lettings and bookings and other activities in the building, will actually cover their planned operational costs and things at the moment. So yes, over time, we'd expect to see that being further detailed as it's enhanced further. But at present, it's certainly demonstrating that the proposal is viable.
Okay. On E 4.6, the board considers this the best available option. So that's an asset transfer. How many other community councils have gone for an asset transfer?
So in terms of that question, do you mean community centres rather than community councils?
Sorry, community centres, yes.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the wider community centres exercise, there are 34 properties within scope. At the moment, this application is the only application that has advanced to an asset transfer application. However, it is fair to say, and it is in the public domain, that we have other groups that are actively working towards that. Some of those groups have signed up full repairing and insuring leases as a precursor to the transfer of ownership going forward. Examples of that include West Calder Community Centre, Whitburn Community Centre and Kirknewton Community Centre, who've all expressed an interest in taking it to the next stage.
Thanks very much, Scott, for that answer. So if we could try and keep the questions to this report, whilst Scott was kind enough to answer that, but we need to make it relevant to this report and to the Uphall Community Centre asset transfer. Mike, you got any other follow-up questions? Thank you.
Yep, on D 4.8 recommendation, so that's item 5 on page 7, there's a condition of transfer to the council's satisfaction. The trust must demonstrate the delivery of community benefit to the value of 280,000. How is that going to be demonstrated?
Scott. Martin, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. The community benefit calculations, there's not one set tool to measure community benefits, but there are some very strong, robust calculator tools that have been developed over the last kind of 5 to 10 years. They have been using a tool called the Social Value Engine, which is nationally recognised, and it effectively puts financial values against social outcomes. Wide range of different activities that can be measured using these tools, from simple things like physical activity, improvements in mental health, engagement, and even just kind of people being involved in social activities. The fact that reducing people's social isolation by having people coming together to kind of meet, but they will have to evidence that these activities have taken place, which is actually common practice for an organisation like this or a community facility, where they do keep registers of the people that are taking part in each of the individual activities within the building. So they would need to demonstrate that, and then what we'll do is work with them to put that into a sort of kind of formal calculator tool to then actually evidence this collective social value of the activities that are taking place within the building.
Okay, thank you. And on section 4, the community proposal 4.1, so that's page 8, it states that there's a retention of 90% of the current users. So I'm just asking, which groups will stop using the centre and why?
Thanks very much, Mike. Again, that might probably be more that the applicant would probably answer that rather than an officer. But Scott, do you know the answer to that question? But equally, I'm not quite sure that it would really be applicable in terms of making our decision. But Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to say along those lines, it would be something that the applicant themselves would be better placed to address, but the applicant has done significant research in terms of the existing user group. As I said, the new body is largely made up of the existing management committee, so they do have an insight into their existing users and have engaged with them, but the detail of that is, as you say, perhaps better answered by the applicant.
Okay, and I was also interested to know what provision there is for the community council to meet at the community centre.
Scott?
Yeah, again, Chair, that would be a local arrangement. If this asset transfer was to go through, then effectively this would be a property in a facility that would be run by the applicant in accordance with their business plan and business model going forward, and it would be up to them to make local arrangements with individual groups.
Okay. So moving on to page 9 and page 13, there is mention of a food bank. Is it the intention to develop a distribution centre in Uphall?
Again, that would have to, that's not a question that the council could answer there, Mike. So you got any other ones there?
Yes, 4.4, negative consequences, page 12. Risk, they make reference to their PESEL analysis, risk register and mitigation. They're actually not included in this report. There's a blurred picture on page 12 of the business plan. So are you able to explain to me what the key risks that were identified, what mitigation's in place and what the residual risk is?
Perfect, thanks very much, Scott. Or Martin, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I don't have that information immediately to hand, but I do know that they have carried out that exercise to look at a risk register and to actually implement that for their own purposes. And that's just about their own operational good governance and things to make sure that they're aware of the risks involved. Both the church itself and the Community Centre Management Committee that have effectively come together to merge to form the new organisation have both got substantial experience in terms of both operating that facility and other facilities. They're also taking advice from the Community Ownership Support Service, that are a Scottish Government funded body that help organisations, community organisations, to work through the actual practicalities and things of managing facilities. So they carry out both FM training as well as best practice in terms of governance and operation of bodies. So they're taking advice from these external bodies and along with a number of other organisations, including the Council's Economic Development team. So they do have these mechanisms in place and things to look at the risk mitigations.
Yeah, so without visibility of the risks, it's difficult for us as councillors to evaluate this. But I understand we have to take this at face value and take that on trust. But looking at the King's Church, it's been operating now for 8 years, and they claim that the current membership is about 80. So I don't know if you know what their membership has been like over the last 8 years. Has it grown? Has it declined? Has it remained stable? Does anyone know?
Thanks very much, Mike. I'll bring in Martin there because that would obviously speak in terms of the viability of the project. So, Martin.
The organisation has been growing in recent years. Obviously, during the 8-year period that they've been in operation, there was the pandemic and things in the middle of it, so their numbers didn't significantly grow at that time. But certainly in recent years, their numbers have been growing and are continuing to grow, and that's their intention, is to continue to expand their membership. They are an independent organisation, but they're also part of a wider collective faith-based group in terms of other King's churches, and they have been supported by both St John's Church in Linlithgow and the King's Church in Edinburgh, where they're working alongside both of these in terms of using some of their wider experience and knowledge as well. And they're also getting some financial support, I believe, from the King's Church in Edinburgh as well. So they have been growing in recent years, and that's certainly their intention, is to continue to do so.
Yeah, well, that's excellent. It just sounds like they're bucking the trend, because the trend at the moment is downwards. There's less than half the population of Scotland claim to follow a faith. Indeed, just along the road from the Uphill Community Centre is St Machan Church, which is the Kirk is trying to sell off. But still sticking with the church, on page 16 of the business plan, they say the percent church use will remain steady at 8%. For every year for the next 5 years, and in the notes there, it says 5%. Can anyone explain that difference for me?
So Martin?
I think it was a simple clerical error in terms of documents being produced at different times, so that when figures were updated in one, they weren't updated in the other. So their intention is to increase to 8%, and I say that's their actual occupancy and building usage. So even their expectation is for the numbers of the members of the church to continue to increase. But in terms of the actual spaces that they'll use and things like that, it's going to increase up to that figure and then remain constant after that, because they do believe it's important both to find a new home for the church, but also to ensure that the building's widely available for wider community use and other organisations to operate as well.
Thank you.
That's grand. Thanks very much. Mike, have you got any other follow-up questions?
Do, but if anyone else wants to come in.
Yep, I noticed Tony had just stuck his hand up there. So, Councillor Tony Boyle.
Chair, I'm quite happy for Mike to carry on with his questions, then I may not have to ask mine.
Over to yourself, Councillor Carlin. Right. So, any other? Oh, Councillor Carlin.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking at the business plan now. So section 6, funding, 6.1, makes reference to page 14 of the business plan. But when I look at page 14, it's talking about trustees and membership and not increasing income and reducing expenditure. Can anyone explain that? Is it just a bad...
Yeah, I'm thinking Martin Thompson.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please, just
Sure.
for clarity to...
Right, so... Section 6, funding, on page 17. In the box, at the end of the first paragraph, it's telling me to look at page 14 of the business plan, where it's going to discuss increasing income and reducing expenditure. But when I go to that page 14, it's talking about trustees and membership.
Martin, are you able to answer why that doesn't marry up?
Sorry, I'm just looking at the business plan, Chair. Like, in page 17, I've got section 9 rather than section 6, which is the proposed usage priorities in page 17.
So it was page 14 Mike was referencing there, doesn't marry up with...
Page 14 is about trustees and membership rather than
That's
finance.
Right. So the reference in the document, section 6, funding, which is page 17, it's telling me for increasing income and reducing expenditure, see page 14 of the business plan. Page 14 of the business plan is talking about trustees and membership.
Was that just I think possibly a typo in the report there, and it's probably should be referenced in page 19 where it's got the expended income versus the expenditure, possibly, Martin?
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify like whether it's actually the business plan that we're referring to, because like these pages aren't marrying up, but could it possibly be the actual application, the asset transfer request form, rather than that business plan?
The application, section 6, right. Funding, page 17.
Sorry, bear with me a moment, Chair. I'm just checking.
That's not a problem, Martin. Take your time. I'm happy to wait.
I think, again, it's going to be the differences between, say, this is the information on the actual application that was submitted to the council. So that's a formal application that's submitted as part of the due process for them to formally request an asset transfer. The reference in that to page 14 of the business plan would have been relevant at that time. However, the business plan has been updated since, and it's a working document and has been updated again. So it's more, I think, if I can pick up on the actual point, rather than the page references and things, because they don't quite marry up. But in terms of the funding aspect, I say there are assumptions that they've made at the moment are based on the existing building usage and lets and information that they've got of who's currently there and what they're paying. The building at the time that this was put together only had a 15% occupancy usage, so the building was kind of greatly underused and had a lot of potential and capacity to increase that. So they have been looking, and again, this is work that's been ongoing at the moment, where they are looking to increase that, and they are working to increase that at the present. They've also historically not submitted applications for external funding in many occasions, a lot of which they would be eligible for, and this is something that they have been working on an active funding strategy, and they've got, I say, both support from other members of other organisations as well as organisations like the Voluntary Sector Gateway, where they're looking to increase that income level. So the figures that are in the plan at present, I say, both that's the business plan that sits alongside the actual formal application, are considered to be very conservative, because they've only put in for their external grant income to be £5,000 in year one within the business plan, and it would be expected to be significantly above that. They're currently working with Stephen Turnbull, who is a independent consultant, but also has done significant work and is and now a part-time employee as well at the Lowport Centre in Linlithgow, which was a similar model where St John's Church took on the Lowport Centre, and it's been very successful. So they're looking to use that best practice from other organisations that have been through a similar exercise, to then bring it to significantly bring in more sizable income levels and things than are actually shown in the figures.
Okay, thank you. On the next line, it says we seek to increase annual income from 12,000 to almost 47,000. That's almost quadrupling the annual income in the first year, which is quite phenomenal. Are you able to explain to me how that's going to be achieved?
Martin?
Thank you, Chair. It's really just building on top of the comments I've just previously made, both in terms of external grant funding, but they're also the actual church itself would become a long-term tenant, and with their increasing use in the vacant occupancy that's there at the moment, the church will be paying a rental figure towards that, which will generate income. But it's a combination of factors. So it's a combination, obviously, both increasing the existing occupancy of other organisations that are using the building, and they have had notes of interest from a number of different organisations that would want to use it, but also looking at external grant income and things that would enhance that. So I think it's recognised that the income figure of £12,000 is very low for a building of that kind, and when benchmarked against other community facilities that either are in community ownership or under community control, you would the figure of the 46,000 is not unrealistic for an organisation of that kind to generate that amount of income.
Okay, I'll take you at that. I just didn't understand how it could quadruple. So it also says in here on page 18, it's talking about reducing staff costs from 64,000 to about 18,000. Is reducing that staff cost going to result in making staff unemployed? Again,
that would be a matter for the organisation and not the council to consider. Bella, I get your question, but it's not something that we would delve into in this committee.
Okay, moving on to page 16 of the business plan. This shows...
Sorry, before you move on there, I noticed Scott had wanted to come in there. Sorry, Scott.
No, thank you, Chair. I think you conveyed my point, but just to make the point, the council does currently have a staff presence there, and as I mentioned earlier, as part of this proposal, the council would be making both staffing and savings around property and staffing costs, but it would not result in any council staff being made unemployed.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. So, staying on staffing, page 16 of the business plan, which is section 9, projected staffing hours are showing an increase year by year. Can anyone explain to me, going forward, you're looking at reducing staff costs whilst increasing staffing hours. How's that going to be achieved?
So again, that would be something that the organisation would have to manage. It would be up to them to deploy their own staff as per the needs of their organisation. It could be that they rely on self-access for some of the groups, as the council does, but equally, it's not something that we can answer here today. So if you've got any other questions there, Mike.
Well, it would have been good if we had representation from the trust that could have answered some of these questions.
But again, in terms,
I understand. Also in here it says the projected footfall is more than doubling by year 3. I'd like to understand what would be the key driver to achieve that.
Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Again, that ties back to the fact that the building has got 15% occupancy when they were first looking to take this on. So these figures might look like really significant increases. However, they're starting off of a relatively low base. So it's really just about getting the community more engaged and having more community organisations being aware that there's vacant space within the building. And they do already have notes of interest from a number of organisations that are wanting to use space. So even though these figures might look like they increase quite dramatically, they're starting from a pretty low base, so I still think that they're relatively conservative in terms of their forecasting.
Okay. So my last point is just an observation on page 19 of the...
If you hold that observation just to your comments,
okay.
Unless it's a question.
It's not a question, it's an observation.
That's perfect, thanks very much. So any other questions to the report? Councillor Tony Boyle.
It's going to be, yes. It's an it comes in under observation because it's something they've said in the report, right? Which I dispute.
So again, if it's an observation, if we can keep that to, unless you turn it into a question.
Yeah.
That the organisation would need to answer. It's not something that our officers could answer here.
Okay. It says in page 16, May 2025, Uphall Community Centre AGM. Around 70 users, right, were there, representing different groups, when the options of CAP versus COM were presented. Right. Is there any evidence being presented of that?
Thanks very much, Tony. Martin, possibly? Scott? Oh, that's grand. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, Kieran, I think, again, referring to previous answers, it's something that the applicant would be best placed to answer. Officers, weren't party to internal discussions or meetings that took place. But if there's a particular ask for a particular piece of information, we'd be happy to take that away and provide Councillor Boyle with that going forward.
That's grand. Thanks, Scott. But equally, I suppose that would be something as a local member that Councillor Boyle could approach that organisation as well to get that information. But thanks for the offer there, Scott. Councillor Boyle, any other further questions?
Yes. And one of the conditions, I believe, in putting something forward like this forward, is that they've got to display in the centre that they've actually applied for community asset transfer. There's no evidence that they've done that, and having been in the community centre, I've no recollection of seeing it. So that could directly tie into why there have been no objections.
Scott?
Yes, Chair, Councillor Boyle's quite right. As part of the statutory process, there's a requirement to put a physical notice on the building and to advertise the publication of it online as well. And I can confirm that both these things were done. We may actually have photographic evidence. We tend to take photographs of notices on buildings, but we did check and a notice was put on the building as part of the process.
Thank you very much, Scott. Tony, any follow-ups?
I'll just leave it to the comments. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thanks very much, Tony. Any other questions? Well, I've had a few, but thankfully Mike's covered them. But in terms of the for yourself, Martin, how confident are you that the group's going to meet the community benefit of 280,000 to allow obviously us to meet the obligations? Martin?
I would be fairly confident that they would meet that figure, and if it was required, there is the possibility that an organisation could effectively pay that figure over 2 years rather than 1 year, through the kind of delivery of the community benefits over an agreed period of time. However, it should also be noted that the calculator tools, when they're looking at the actual valuation for community benefits, they are fairly high because of the impact, particularly in activities such as physical health. By organisations being able to demonstrate that people are regularly taking part in physical activity over a prolonged period of time, that can have quite a significant impact of reducing people's negative outcomes on health. Whether that's something that is either reduction in things like diabetes, heart disease, these types of activities, which do have substantial costs associated with them if people go on to present negative outcomes. And these databases effectively do look at sizable demographic groups that take part in both the activities such as physical activity and compare them to people who don't, and then they can compare them to how often these people visit their GP, how often, or the percentage likelihood that they would present with more negative outcomes, and they can effectively take these figures from the NHS cost book to actually start putting some numbers and things against it. So these sorts of figures are quite substantial for people doing things like regular physical exercise, but even bringing people together, as long as the evidence that activity has definitely happened, there is substantial improvements in people's mental health as well, of bringing people together, reducing social isolation. So the figures are quite substantial for community benefits. Just to benchmark against a few other similar type organisations that we've recently done a similar exercise for, the figures are usually in excess of about £500,000 just for some headline activity, without going into the full detail of every activity in the building. But I would be very confident. And I can also clarify that, the community benefit calculation, it can actually cover a period of 3 years. So if they do require to pay that, it could be paid over a prolonged period rather than just within 12 months.
That's great. Thanks very much, Martin. Councillor Alison Adamson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't know who I'm directing this to, but with the with today's decision making, which is obviously very important, is there any reason why there's no representatives from the Uphall Community Trust with the King's Church? Normally, when we look at these types of applications, we have the applicants speaking very vocally and speaking up for what they're asking for, but there's nobody here at all from the Trust. Is there any reason for that? And or were they aware that they could make representations in person?
Thanks very much, Alison. Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we totally accept that that position and that question. And the answer to that question is yes, the applicant were very much made aware that they had the ability to attend today, and I think the best way to put it, we encouraged them to do so, but they decided not to. What I would say is our engagement with the group has been excellent over the piece. We have had a recurring monthly meeting with them, and it's been a very positive experience, and officers have been satisfied on that. But to answer the councillor's question, the applicant did have the opportunity to attend, but decided not to.
Thank you very much, Scott. Any further questions? Nope. Moving on to comments. Councillor Boyle.
Yeah, thanks. Page 16, going back to the bit about the AGM, right? They say that where the users when the options of CAT versus COM were presented, right? There was no opposition voice to this proposal. I was present at that. People didn't know at that time what they were talking about. Right. The Facebook promotion campaign, the new survey and information, reached 7,000 people, mostly centred in the Uphall area. Did they provide any information on the outcome of that survey? It says I'm going to leave it at that. What I'm picking up. This is from the community and members of the Community Council, who was one of the groups who always held their meetings in the community centre, but suddenly there was no space for them. Community Council had to find space in another charity in Uphall to hold their meeting last Wednesday night. What I am getting from the community is that they think this is a land grab and no more than that. But I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Carroll.
I echo what Tony's saying. I'm also disappointed that there's no representation from the applicant, because some of the questions that I've asked have been deflected because there's no representation here. And also looking at page 19, section 8 of the business plan, surplus versus deficit, an observation by me is the figures, they concern me. The margins are so tight. That was £104 surplus in the first year. I mean, you could sneeze and lose that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. Any other comments? Nope, that's fine. So that moves us on to do we anybody have a position on this? So obviously, as chair, I'm going to move the recommendation of the report, and that be approve the community asset transfer request received from Uphall Community Trust, West King's Church, West Lothian for Uphall Community Centre on the terms that have been set out in the report. Do you have a seconder for that? Nope. Is there any alternative to that? Nope. That's grand. So just looking for some advice from our officers here, because presumably that based on that the asset transfer cannot proceed. Is that correct? Can I get some advice on that?
Chair,
Lorraine?
could I ask if we could adjourn just for a few minutes till I go and speak to the governance manager, please?
Yeah, that would be fabulous.
Thank you.
I've got my council mobile with me if they need to speak.
Hi, Chair. Thank you for bearing with us. I'll hand the meeting back over to you now, and you can speak with colleagues in the chamber.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Lorraine, and thank you very much, colleagues, for your continued patience. So obviously today I have moved a position and there wasn't a seconder there at that point in time. So I'm just going to take another opportunity to ask if there's any alternatives to that, any alternate positions. Councillor Boyle.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to move an alternative position, and that is that no decision is taken today, and effectively the meeting is adjourned to a future date in agreement set with the officers. In that period, they can either say to the applicant to come along, or they can get from the applicant answers to the questions which had been raised. So that's the position I am proposing.
Thank you very much, Tony. And do you have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Carlin.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you very much. So I'm just, before we move on from that and agree that or not agree that, I would just like to bring Alison Marr in to just give us some legal advice on especially around the date of determination, and most importantly, what would happen if that is to extend that date. Alison.
Thank you. You'll see from the committee report that a decision is required to be made within 6 months of the validation date. So in this case, that takes us to the 14th of May this year. The council can discuss with the applicant an extension to that. The applicant would need to agree to that extension, so that is an option with the applicant's agreement. And if they don't agree, then the applicant would be open to use the review procedure on the basis that the council hadn't come to a decision within the 6-month time limit. So it's a risk for the committee to discuss and decide on if they want to approach the applicant for an agreement to an extension.
Thank you very much, Alison. Anybody have any questions on Alison's update? So quite clearly it's the risk that the committee takes if the applicant does decide not to extend. Anybody got any questions or concerns that they would like clarification on? Take silence as no, so that's good. So certainly, so we do have a position there. And is there any alternatives to the position that's been proposed by Tony and by Mike? No, so we're agreed that we will obviously move this to a future date, and the officers will liaise with the applicant to obviously gain that information that we're looking for, and also to request that extension. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming along. And lastly, thank you for bearing with us, and a huge thank you to the officers as well.